The autumn rain had stopped, leaving the park glistening beneath the fading afternoon light. Thomas sat on the weathered wooden bench near the pond, his shoulders hunched against the chill that had nothing to do with the season. For 3 months, he'd been coming to this same spot, always at the same time, hoping the routine might somehow anchor him to a life that had become unmoored. His wife had left him in July. No dramatic confrontation. No thunderous argument, just a quiet goodbye and a packed suitcase. She'd called him distant, emotionally unavailable, a shell of the man she'd married. The worst part was that she was right. Somewhere along the way, he'd constructed walls so high that even he couldn't remember what lay behind them. Now, at 52, he found himself utterly alone. The tears came without warning, as they often did now. Thomas had never been a weeper, but lately his body seemed intent on purging something deep within him. He sat rigid on the bench, letting the moisture slide down his weathered cheeks, not bothering to wipe them away. What was the point? There was no one watching. No one cared. Why do you leak? The voice was impossibly small, impossibly curious. Thomas jerked upright, startled. He'd heard nothing approaching. Before him hovered a creature so fantastical, he initially thought his grief-addled mind was conjuring it. She was no taller than a 5-year-old, with luminescent silver skin that seemed to glow with its own soft light. Her eyes were enormous, tilted slightly upward and filled with what could only be described as genuine concern. Delicate, translucent appendages, neither quite wings nor arms, extended gracefully from her sides. "I'm sorry," he stammered, instinctively looking around to see if anyone else was witnessing this impossible moment. The park was empty. Did you ask why I'm crying?" "Your eyes leak water," the creature confirmed solemnly. "My mother says that happens when humans experience pain." "Are you broken?" Thomas found himself laughing, a sound so foreign it felt like it belonged to someone else. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I suppose I am." The small being tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him feel truly seen for the first time in months. When she reached out one delicate appendage and touched his tear-dampened cheek, a warmth spread through his chest that he didn't recognize. "Come," she said simply. "Mama can fix broken things." The vessel was small but impossibly functional, its interior a soft pearl white with walls that seemed to breathe gently. Thomas ducked through the opening more out of instinct than necessity, as the diminutive creature had casually glided through without concern. Inside, the air felt different, clearer. Somehow as though it contained more oxygen, or perhaps something else entirely, that is. Human lungs found rejuvenating. Alien child, she called herself, veil-guided. Him with surprising gentleness toward what appeared to be a living space. Everything was scaled to her proportions, yet somehow accommodated his presence without awkwardness. That was when he saw her, Vale's mother, whom she called Ethel. She was taller than Vale, perhaps reaching his shoulder, with a more refined version of the same luminescent features. But what struck Thomas most profoundly was her face, or rather, the expression on it. She regarded him with a depth of compassion that transcended species, biology, and the sheer impossibility of their meeting. When she moved toward him, Thomas felt himself instinctively tense, then release. "You are suffering," Ethel said, her voice like wind chimes made of starlight. My daughter sensed it. She has always had a gift for finding wounded creatures. "I don't understand what's happening," Thomas managed, his voice barely steady. You're not real. I'm having a breakdown. My therapist would have a field day with this." Ethel's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement. "You are experiencing something your mind struggles to categorize, yes. But you are not insane, Thomas. We are travelers from beyond your atmosphere. We study emotional ecosystems, how species bond, how they heal, how they sometimes forget to care for themselves." She gestured to a curved seat, which Thomas lowered himself into cautiously. Vale clambered up beside him, settling against his arm with surprising comfort. Ethel produced what appeared to be a beverage, its color shifting between lavender and silver. "Drink," she instructed. "Not to harm, but to help you feel more present. You exist partially in your pain, partially in regret. We must bring you fully into the now." Against his better judgment, or perhaps because he'd already surrendered the last vestiges of rational thinking, Thomas drank. The liquid was cool, slightly sweet, and immediately soothing. A wave of calm washed through him, not suppressing his sadness but somehow contextualizing it. He could feel the weight of his loneliness without being crushed by it. Vale took his hand, her appendages surprisingly warm and supple. "Mama says that being broken isn't the same as being unfixable," she explained with childlike wisdom. "Mama was broken once too. Before I was born, she forgot how to feel joy, but she found a way back." Ethel placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture so fundamentally maternal that something inside Thomas's locked chambers began to shift. For the first time in months, he wasn't alone with his pain. And somehow, impossibly, that made all the difference. Over the next 3 weeks, Thomas found himself slipping into a routine that would have seemed utterly insane to describe aloud. He told his few remaining friends he'd joined a meditation group in the park. In a way, it wasn't entirely false. His evenings became divided between his empty apartment and the small vessel that Ethel and Vale had ingeniously hidden in a remote corner of the botanical gardens. He learned that Ethel had been traveling for over 200 of their years, a lifespan that made Thomas's 52 feel infinitesimal. She had lost her own mate long ago, had raised Vale alone through unimaginable challenges, and had developed a philosophy about second chances and unexpected connections that seemed to reframe everything Thomas thought he understood about loss. Vale, meanwhile, had latched onto him with the unself-conscious affection of childhood. She would hover around his shoulders as he sat on their curved seating, sometimes humming in a frequency that made his teeth tingle pleasantly. She brought him things she found beautiful: smooth stones, luminescent insects she'd carefully contained in small vessels. Once even a child's toy she'd somehow recovered from Earth. When he tried to explain it was litter, she'd simply said, "But you smiled when you saw it." Things that cause smiles are not waste. One evening, as artificial starlight filtered through the vessel's transparent ceiling, Thomas found himself telling Ethel things he'd never told anyone. About his father, who had never quite approved of him. About the way his marriage had slowly crystallized into silence. About the moment he'd realized he'd become a person he didn't recognize, closed off, suspicious, incapable of letting anyone truly close. Ethel listened with her entire being. There was no judgment in her expression, no desire to fix him immediately with platitudes. She simply received his words like precious offerings. "On my world," she said softly, "we believe that walls are built not from hardness, but from fear. Your fear was so profound that you built a fortress, not realizing you were the prisoner. How do I tear it down?" Thomas asked, and was surprised by the strength in his own voice. "You don't tear it down," Ethel said. "You deconstruct it, carefully, piece by piece. You let others help you carry the stones." She reached out and gently traced what might have been a blessing or a caress across his forehead. Her touch was cool, electric, absolutely grounding. That night, in the tender intimacy of the quiet vessel, Vale fell asleep against his chest while he talked with Ethel. The alien mother shared memories of her own journey toward wholeness, not through grand epiphanies, but through small moments of connection. A child born under unfamiliar stars. The first time someone beyond her bloodline had shown her genuine kindness. The slow realization that love wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity as vital as air. "You're teaching me how to live again," Thomas said at one point. The words barely above a whisper. Ethel's large eyes glistened with what he could only interpret as her own tears. No, she corrected softly. I'm simply showing you a mirror. The capacity for love, for healing, for growth, it was always within you. You merely forgot how to access it. When he left the vessel that night, his footsteps felt lighter. Not healed, not yet, but genuinely hopeful in a way he hadn't been in years. Thomas's apartment had become unbearably quiet. He began to understand that silence could be either restorative or destructive, depending on what you carried within it. After 3 weeks of divided evenings, he found himself spending more time in the botanical gardens than at home, and less time pretending his double life was sustainable. It was Ethel who broached the inevitable question during one particularly intimate evening. As she prepared something warm for him to drink, a beverage that had become part of their ritual, always slightly different, always nourishing in ways he couldn't quite articulate. You must decide, she said, not unkindly. We remain here for 4 more cycles of your moon. After that, we depart. This is not our world, and we cannot stay indefinitely without risking exposure. You must choose. Do you wish to remain connected to us, or do you wish to return fully to your human life? Thomas set down his cup, his hands trembling. He'd been avoiding this exact question for weeks. The logical part of him, the part that still clung to his old architecture of rational thought, knew the answer. Return to reality. Except that this had been an extraordinary interlude, perhaps even a psychotic break that he should finally address with a proper psychiatrist. Resume his life. Find a job. Maybe travel. Slowly rebuild whatever dignity his divorce had left him. But another part of him, a part that Ethel and Vale had gently coaxed back to life, rebelled violently against that plan. Is it possible... He began hesitantly. Could I? Would you consider... He couldn't finish, couldn't quite articulate the request that seemed to defy every law of physics and reason. Vale, who had been resting in the corner of the vessel in what Thomas had come to recognize as her sleep state, suddenly became alert. She drifted over and wrapped herself around his arm, a gesture that was somehow both childlike and profoundly wise. You want to stay with us, she said matter-of-factly. You want to not be lonely anymore. Thomas felt tears, those troublesome, cleansing tears, slide down his cheeks. Yes, he whispered. But I don't know if that's possible. I'm human. One belong here. Ethel moved closer, and Thomas finally understood what intimacy meant when it transcended conventional categories. She wasn't offering him romance in any traditional sense. She was offering him something far deeper, genuine companionship, a place in her small family unit, the opportunity to help raise Vale and to be helped in turn. We have the technology, Ethel said slowly, to provide you with an existence among us. It would require modifications, enhancements to your respiratory system, adaptations to your cellular structure. You would remain humanoid, but you would be able to survive our atmosphere without the vessel's support. You would be part of our community, not merely a visitor. Thomas's breath caught. You're offering me the chance to leave Earth. We are offering you the choice, Ethel corrected. Your human world has rejected you, or so you believe. But there are humans, I suspect, who would miss you. We must consider them. True healing requires us to honor all our connections, not just escape the painful ones. That night, before he left the vessel, Ethel held him a gesture that, despite their biological differences, felt like the most natural thing in existence. Her cool skin against his warmth, their different respiratory rhythms slowly synchronizing. In that moment, Thomas felt genuinely cherished, genuinely seen, genuinely part of something larger than his own suffering. Thomas spent the next week doing something he hadn't done in years. He reached out. He called his brother, whom he hadn't spoken to in 18 months. He visited his former therapist, not with shame, but with curiosity, asking for help to process what he was experiencing. He even, in a moment of courage that surprised himself, sent an email to his ex-wife, not seeking reconciliation, but simply expressing gratitude for the years they'd shared and apologies for the ways he'd failed to be present. These conversations, painful as they were, proved something crucial. The people in his life hadn't abandoned him entirely. They'd been waiting, hoping he would find his way back to connection. His brother came to meet him, not in the park, but in a coffee shop where they talked for 3 hours, rebuilding a bridge that Thomas's wall building had nearly destroyed. His ex-wife responded to his email with a long letter of her own, forgiving him not because he needed it, but because she'd already moved forward. On the final night before Ethel and Vale were scheduled to depart, Thomas made his decision. He arrived at the vessel with his essential documents, a journal filled with memories, and a heart that felt both empty and full in equal measure. Ethel and Vale waited for him, their luminescence seeming to pulse with anticipation. "I'm staying," he said, the words both terrifying and absolutely right. "But not today." "Not yet." Ethel's large eyes registered surprise. Vale's small form deflated slightly. "I'm going to give myself 1 year," Thomas continued. "I'm going to repair the connections I still have on Earth. I'm going to rebuild my relationships with my family. I'm going to help my brother with his business. I'm going to genuinely live in my human world, rather than just exist in it. And then, if you're willing to wait, if you'll return, I'll join you. I'll become part of your family not because I'm running away, but because I'm running towards something real." Ethel regarded him with an expression that contained profound approval and deep understanding. She reached out and touched his face, and he understood. This was a test, and he'd passed it. "This is wisdom," she said softly. "This is the understanding that true love requires us to honor all our ties. We will return to you, Thomas. In your Earth years, we will traverse the cosmos and return to this place. If your resolve remains, we will complete the transformation." Vale drifted to him and wrapped herself around his neck, her small form trembling with what he recognized as acceptance. "I'll wait for you," she whispered. "Mama says that love is patient. Mama says waiting is how we know something is real." Thomas held her, breathing in the faintly ethereal scent of her being, knowing that he was saying goodbye to her and to the creature he might have become. But not forever. Never forever. He left the vessel that night as changed as he'd entered it weeks before, but this time the change was rooted in choice, in courage, in the radical decision to honor both the past and the future. He began attending a support group for divorced men. He started an antique restoration business with his brother. He volunteered at the community center, finding purpose in helping others navigate their own loneliness. And every night, without fail, he would look up at the stars and smile, knowing that somewhere in the vast cosmos, a small alien girl and her mother were counting the days until they would return. He had learned the most profound lesson. Family didn't have to be born of the same species to be real. Love didn't have to fit conventional definitions to be true. And sometimes, the greatest gifts came from the most unexpected places. 1 year later, as Thomas sat on his park bench watching the autumn sunset, he felt the familiar hum in the air. The vessel descended slowly, brilliantly, without concern for concealment. Thomas rose, his heart soaring, ready to embrace the impossible family that had taught him how to live again. The greatest journey, he understood now, wasn't about leaving Earth. It was about learning to open his heart, and sometimes that opened every door in the universe.